People assume waitresses don't notice much, that we smile, write down orders, and drift through conversations like background noise. But when you serve the same people day after day, you start hearing things. You start seeing things others miss. That's how I ended up staring at a billionaire's so-called priceless document one quiet Thursday afternoon and realizing, in an instant, that it was fake. I'd been working at the Copper Lantern, an old-world restaurant tucked near the harbor, the kind of place where people came to impress or be impressed. Dark wood, flickering candles, piano music too soft to mask the sound of ambition. My apron smelled of lemon polish and rosemary, and my shoes ached most nights. But I loved that job. It was the kind of place where you could learn a lot about human nature, if you paid attention. That day, Mr. Vale walked in. He was the kind of man who didn't need to announce himself. The air did it for him. Silver hair, dark suit, and eyes like storm glass. Rumor was, he'd made his fortune in rare art and historical manuscripts. He came in often, always with a different guest, always with the same worn leather portfolio beside his chair. But that afternoon was different. He wasn't his usual composed self. He kept checking the door, adjusting his cufflinks, glancing toward the bar. When his guest arrived, a young lawyer with trembling hands, Mr. Vale opened the portfolio and pulled out a yellowed parchment, sealed with crimson wax. He whispered, "This is the original declaration, the only one in private hands." My tray froze midair. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And I saw something no one else noticed. The ink wasn't faded the way it should have been. The edges were too clean. And the wax? It bore a mark that didn't exist until centuries later. I felt a chill run down my spine. Because in that moment, I realized something dangerous. Mr. Vale's priceless treasure, the one he'd built his empire on, was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I was the only one who knew. Sometimes, truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the quietest person in the room to notice. The night Mr. Vale showed that document, something shifted in the air at the Copper Lantern. The waitstaff whispered about it afterward, joking that we'd just served dinner to history itself. But I couldn't join in their excitement. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that parchment, the way the ink shimmered faintly under the chandelier, too dark, too alive. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. What did I know about historical documents, anyway? I was just a waitress with a community college degree in art history that never led anywhere. But the truth is, I did know things, small, forgotten things most people didn't care about. My old professor used to say, real history smells different. It carries time in its fibers. That parchment smelled like coffee and varnish, not like time. Mr. Vale came in again the next evening, alone this time. He sat at his usual corner table, ordered a single espresso, and unfolded the same document, laying it flat beside the candle. My curiosity got the better of me. When I set down his cup, I caught a closer glimpse of the seal, a lion holding a rose. Except that emblem wasn't used until the early 1800s. The document he claimed to own was supposedly from the 1600s. My heart thudded. I wanted to look away, but my eyes wouldn't obey. Mr. Vale noticed, of course. His gaze lifted, sharp, assessing. "Something wrong with my order?" he asked, voice calm but edged like glass. "No, sir, I managed. Just admiring the seal. It's beautiful." He smiled, faintly. Beauty can be deceptive. I nodded, retreating, but his words clung to me like static. That night, as I wiped down the tables, I noticed something new, a folded white napkin left where he'd been sitting. Tucked inside was a single silver key and a note that read, for the curious eye, "Be careful what you see." I should have thrown it away, pretended it wasn't there. But something inside me, the same part that still dreamed of working in a museum, wouldn't let it go. I pocketed the key. And that was the moment my quiet life began to unravel. Because sometimes the smallest act of curiosity is what opens the biggest doors, and not all of them are meant to be opened. The key kept me awake that night. I turned it over and over in my hand, tracing the ridges until dawn slipped through the blinds. It was old-fashioned, brass, heavy, The kind you'd expect to find in an antique desk or a safe. The kind of thing that didn't belong in a restaurant napkin. By morning, I convinced myself it was some kind of mistake. Maybe Mr. Vale had meant to give it to his guest. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. But the note, for the curious eye, kept whispering in the back of my mind. When I arrived at the Copper Lantern for my next shift, the air felt charged, like a storm was waiting outside. Mr. Vale was there again, seated by the window this time, reading a newspaper. When our eyes met, he gave the faintest nod, as if acknowledging a secret we now shared. I brought his usual espresso, and before I could retreat, he said quietly, "You found it." I froze. He folded his newspaper, his tone low but deliberate. "If you're going to look, you must follow the rules. Do you understand?" I didn't, not really. But something in his voice told me this was no game. "What rules?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. 3 simple ones. 1. Never ask direct questions. 2. Never remove anything from its place. And 3. His eyes narrowed slightly. If you recognize what doesn't belong, walk away before someone else notices you did. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slid a small leather card holder across the table. "If curiosity still keeps you awake tonight," he said, "go to this address after closing." He stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and left before I could say another word. The address was a warehouse down by the docks, the kind of place that didn't appear on delivery routes or Google Maps. That night, I told myself I wouldn't go. That I'd throw the key away, forget about the mysterious billionaire and his counterfeit parchment. But when I clocked out, the napkin with the note still burned in my apron pocket. I found myself walking toward the harbor, the waves hissing against the rocks, the fog rolling in like smoke. The old warehouses stood silent, windows dark, except for one faint light spilling from a second-floor window. The lock turned easily. The door creaked open. Inside, the smell of dust and ink filled the air, and rows of parchment-lined tables stretched before me like a ghostly museum. That's when I realized what the key unlocked wasn't just a door. It was a test, and I had just accepted it. Because sometimes, fate doesn't tap politely. It leaves a key and waits to see if you're brave or foolish enough to use it. The warehouse felt suspended in time, not abandoned, but preserved. Dust floated like slow snowflakes in the lamplight, and the air smelled of old paper, ink, and something faintly metallic. Each table held stacks of documents, glass cases, and delicate brushes. Whoever worked here didn't just collect things. They created them. I stepped carefully between the rows, heart pounding so loud it almost drowned the creak of the floorboards. The papers on the tables looked ancient, maps, letters, royal decrees, but up close, they were too perfect. The edges looked burned, but the scorch marks were identical from sheet to sheet. Fakes. Every one of them. On a far table, I saw something that made my throat tighten, the same lion and rose seal I'd seen at the Copper Lantern. Beside it lay small tins of wax, aged parchment, and a magnifying glass etched with the initials V. Vale Enterprises. My stomach turned. Mr. Vale wasn't just in the business of owning history. He was in the business of manufacturing it. I wanted to run. I should have. But something stopped me, a single framed photograph hanging crooked on the back wall. It showed a young man in front of a modest print shop, holding hands with a little boy. Written underneath, in fading ink, were the words, "For Thomas. May truth always be your inheritance." I touched the frame, and that's when I noticed a narrow drawer beneath the table. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a single parchment, sealed with a different emblem, a dove instead of a lion. It looked real, older, fragile. Unfolding it felt like trespassing on time itself. The script was faint but elegant, signed by a name I recognized from history books. My chest tightened as I read the last line. The forgery must serve the truth until the truth can be seen again. A sound snapped behind me, the creak of a door. Curiosity can be dangerous in the wrong hands, a voice said. I turned. Mr. Vale stood in the doorway, calm, unreadable, hands clasped behind his back. "I told you not to remove anything," he said softly. I didn't, I whispered. I just needed to understand. He nodded once, almost sadly. Then perhaps it's time you did. He stepped forward, his gaze moving to the parchment in my trembling hands. That, he said, is the only genuine piece in this room. Everything else, every masterpiece, every relic, every so-called treasure, is built to protect it. The room tilted slightly as his words sank in. Nothing made sense, and yet, somehow, it all did. The real mystery wasn't what was fake. It was why. And that, I was about to learn, would test more than just my curiosity. It would test my conscience. Mr. Vale motioned for me to sit at the long oak table, and for a moment, I thought he might call the police, or worse. But his tone had softened. There was something almost weary in his movements, as if the weight of what surrounded him had long since turned from pride to burden. "You see the irony, don't you?" he said, lighting a small lamp. The glow spilled across his face, revealing deep lines around his eyes. "Everyone believes I'm a collector of truth. But I've built my fortune on imitation." I swallowed hard. "Then why keep one real document hidden here?" He hesitated, staring at the parchment in my hands. "Because it's not mine. It was my father's." The photograph on the wall suddenly made sense. The print shop, the little boy. "You were Thomas," I said softly. He gave a small nod. "My father was a restorer. Honest, meticulous. He could repair any page, but he refused to fake one. Until one day, someone brought him a royal decree, genuine, priceless, and demanded 10 perfect copies. He refused. They burned his shop to the ground." I could hear the pain in his voice. "So, you decided to outplay them?" He smiled faintly. "You understand faster than most." He walked to the window, looking out toward the harbor lights. "The men who ruined him became the same collectors who praise me now. They've paid millions for their own vanity, forgeries so convincing they'll never admit they've been deceived. It's my private revenge." I looked around at the room again, the rows of perfect lies. "So all this is payback?" "Correction," he said. "Justice. The truth hidden in plain sight." But something about it didn't sit right. "And the genuine document? Why keep it locked away?" He turned back to me, eyes glinting. "Because if I sold it, it would only become another trophy. My father believed truth should live freely, not be owned." He leaned forward. "But you, of all people, saw through my work. You noticed the wrong ink, the wrong wax. That makes you inconveniently perceptive." My pulse quickened. "Are you threatening me?" He chuckled softly. "Quite the opposite. I'm offering you a choice." He gestured toward the real parchment. "Help me finish what my father began. Deliver this to the world, without revealing where it came from, or walk away now and forget everything." It felt impossible. One path promised danger, the other guilt. I was a waitress, not a whistleblower. Yet I knew if I walked away, I'd never forgive myself. "I'll help," I said quietly. He smiled, a mix of relief and warning. "Then you'll need to learn fast. The people who buy lies don't take kindly to truth." As he locked the door behind us, the faint echo of the sea followed. I knew life would never go back to normal. Because from that night on, I wasn't just a waitress. I was the keeper of a truth powerful enough to destroy a fortune, and maybe save a name. And with it came the quiet, trembling knowledge that integrity always demands a price. Over the next few weeks, my life split in two. By day, I was still the same waitress, balancing trays, smiling through small talk, pretending nothing had changed. By night, I became Mr. Vale's unlikely accomplice, cataloging and documenting every forged relic in that dimly lit warehouse by the harbor. He trusted me enough to show his process, how he aged paper with smoke and vinegar, how he replicated centuries-old inks with crushed berries and soot. "It's not forgery," he said one evening as we worked side by side. "It's preservation of power. They want myths. I simply give them what they already believe." I wanted to believe he was a man driven by justice, not bitterness. But the more I watched him, the more I sensed something deeper, an obsession that had begun to consume the justice it once served. And then, one night, things began to unravel. It was near closing time at the Copper Lantern. Mr. Vale was meeting with a buyer, an elegant woman in pearls and an icy expression. He'd asked me to serve their table personally. When I set down their wine, I noticed her briefcase half open and inside, a photograph of the very parchment we'd promised to protect. I froze. The genuine document had never left the warehouse. Or so I thought. That night, after the restaurant emptied, I went to the docks. The warehouse was dark. My key still fit the lock, but the air inside felt different, too still, too cold. The desk where the parchment had been was bare. Only the white napkin remained, folded neatly, as if waiting for me. Inside it, another note: "Truth changes hands quietly." I turned on the small lamp and searched the drawers. Everything was there: the forgeries, the tools, the wax, but not the real parchment. My pulse quickened. Had he sold it? Betrayed his father's legacy after all his talk of justice? I didn't have time to decide what to believe. The sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell, heavy, deliberate. When the door opened, it wasn't Mr. Vale. It was the woman from the restaurant. She stepped into the light, her pearl earrings catching the glow. "Miss Rowan," she said, knowing my name, "you've been very busy." I took a step back. "Where's Mr. Vale?" Her lips curved in a knowing smile. "He's made his choice. Now I need to know if you'll make yours." In her gloved hand, she held the dove-sealed parchment, the real one. And at that moment, I realized this wasn't just about forgeries or revenge. It was about ownership, of history, of truth, of conscience. And somehow, I'd been pulled right into the center of it. I felt the weight of that little silver key still in my pocket, warm from my hand. Every instinct told me to run, but I didn't. Because sometimes doing the right thing means standing still long enough for the truth to find you. The woman in pearls placed the parchment on the table, smoothing it gently with her gloved hands. Her composure was chilling, measured, almost tender, like someone handling a newborn secret. "You don't understand what you're protecting," she said. "I understand enough," I replied, trying to sound steadier than I felt. "That document belongs to Mr. Vale's father. It's not for sale." She looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is about money?" Her voice held an edge of pity that made me bristle. "That page," she said, tapping the parchment, "was never meant to exist. It contradicts half the lineage that men like Mr. Vale and the people he serves built their fortunes on. It's proof that history isn't just written by the victors. Sometimes it's forged by them." Her words sank in slowly. "So, you want to destroy it?" She smiled faintly. "Preserve the illusion, dear. The world runs on it." I heard a sound behind me, boots on the stairs. Mr. Vale appeared, his face pale and drawn. For a long moment he said nothing. He just looked at the parchment, then at me. "Give it to her," he said quietly. I stared at him, stunned. "What?" "She's right," he continued, stepping closer. "If that document goes public, it'll ruin more than reputations. It'll destroy entire families, mine included. My father didn't understand that. I thought I did, but I was wrong." The woman's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You've come to your senses." But I could see something flickering in Mr. Vale's eyes, something conflicted, something human. He turned to me and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Sometimes the truth needs a guardian who knows when not to speak." I looked at the parchment lying between them, the symbol of the dove, still unbroken. Everything I believed about justice, about honesty, crashed into the harsh reality before me. If I gave it up, I'd be complicit in burying the truth. If I refused, I might destroy a man who'd tried, however imperfectly, to right his father's wrongs. "Give it to me," the woman said again. But instead of moving, I reached for the lamp and turned it off. The room fell into darkness, except for the faint moonlight from the window. In that silence, I heard only breathing, hers, Mr. Vale's, and my own. Then I whispered, "Truth doesn't belong to anyone, not even you." Before she could react, I grabbed the parchment, folded it against my chest, and ran. Down the stairs, through the fog, the echo of their shouts chasing me into the night. My shoes slipped on the cobblestones, my lungs burned, and my heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to protect what was real, even if I didn't yet understand how. Behind me, a single thought pulsed like thunder. There comes a moment when integrity isn't a word, it's a line you choose to cross or defend. And that night, I crossed mine. I didn't stop running until the city lights thinned and the harbor fog swallowed everything behind me. My hands trembled as I clutched the parchment beneath my coat, its fragile edges brushing against my heart with every step. Somewhere behind that curtain of mist, I knew Mr. Vale and the woman in pearls were still searching, but not together. Their alliance, I realized, had fractured the moment I fled. I ended up in the one place that had always felt safe, the small public library up the hill, where I used to read during my breaks. The librarian, Mrs. Hadley, was locking up for the night when she saw me, soaked and shaking. "My dear," she whispered, unlocking the door again. "What happened?" I couldn't explain. Not all of it. I just asked for a box, some archival tissue, and her silence. She gave me all three without question. In that quiet reading room, under flickering lights, I laid the parchment flat one last time. The words, though faded, were clear enough now to read fully. It wasn't just a royal decree, it was a correction. A forgotten revision that erased one family's claim to a vast inheritance and restored it to a line of ordinary merchants. It changed the origin story of an empire. And beneath the formal script, a signature, Thomas Vale, Restorer. My breath caught. Mr. Vale's father hadn't forged it. He'd written it, to preserve a truth someone had tried to erase. The so-called forgery was, in fact, a confession. A record of what really happened, disguised as imitation so it could survive the centuries. Mr. Vale hadn't been protecting a lie. He'd been protecting his father's act of courage. At dawn, I placed the document in a weatherproof envelope and mailed it anonymously to the National Historical Registry, with a note written on the white napkin that had started it all. Some truths are too heavy for one family to carry. Let history decide. I didn't go back to the Copper Lantern after that. I heard later that Mr. Vale left the city quietly. No charges, no scandal, just absence. The woman in pearls disappeared, too. Weeks passed before I received a letter. No return address. Inside was the silver key I'd once pocketed, tied with a new ribbon. Attached was a single line in Mr. Vale's handwriting. "My father would have trusted you." I cried. Not from fear or guilt, but from a strange, quiet relief. The kind that comes when you finally understand that doing the right thing rarely feels glorious. It feels lonely, necessary, and good. Sometimes, the truth survives not because it's loud, but because someone ordinary chooses to carry it forward quietly. And somewhere in a museum glass case now sits a parchment with a dove seal and a simple inscription beside it. Donated anonymously, in honor of those who protect truth without profit. Every time I visit, I see my reflection in that glass. Just a waitress once, nothing more. Yet somehow that was enough. Because in the end, it isn't wealth or power that defines a legacy. It's the courage to tell the truth, even when no one believes you should. It's been 3 years since that night at the harbor, but some evenings, when the air smells faintly of sea salt and varnish, I still think of Mr. Vale. I wonder if he ever found peace, or if he still walks through rooms full of quiet ghosts, the relics of everything he created and everything he tried to atone for. As for me, I never went back to waitressing. One small truth led me down a path I never expected. I used the savings I tucked away, tips mostly, to finish my degree in art restoration. Now I work at the Maritime History Museum, not far from where the Copper Lantern once stood. And every morning, when I unlock the gallery doors, I pass by that same parchment, the one with the dove seal. The museum never learned its full story. Officially, it's listed as an anonymous 17th century correction of provenance. But I know what it really is, a quiet victory. A son's attempt to restore his father's honor. A reminder that even the smallest act of integrity can outlast the richest deception. Sometimes visitors stop to admire it, talking softly about its delicate calligraphy or the mystery of its origins. I smile to myself and let them wonder. Truth doesn't need an audience to matter, only a witness willing to protect it. I keep the silver key on a chain around my neck. It isn't fancy, but it reminds me of the rule that started everything. If you recognize what doesn't belong, walk away before someone else notices you did. Except I didn't walk away. And I'm glad I didn't. Because every so often, someone asks about the small white napkin displayed beside the parchment, the one with a faint coffee stain and a single handwritten line. They lean closer to read it, unaware that the handwriting is mine. Some truths live quietly, but they live forever. I usually watch them smile, thoughtful, maybe even moved. Then they walk on, carrying a piece of that quiet truth with them, the same way I did. And if there's one lesson I hope they take, it's this. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. You just have to see clearly, act kindly, and protect what's real, even when the world tells you it's worthless. Because the smallest act of honesty can echo through time, long after the lies have faded. And that is the kind of legacy worth serving.